I'm originally from Dry Creek, a town so barren even the rocks seemed thirsty. I left years ago, chasing a better life in El Paso. I found a job, someone to love, and a routine that made sense. But all of it unraveled in less than a year. I ended up with nothing, no home, no work, and a heart torn apart. The only thing that still carried my name was my grandmother's abandoned house back home. I thought I'd rest there, just sleep for a while, get back on my feet. But what I walked into was something else entirely. And no, I'm not talking about the blistering heat or the cracked roads. I'm talking about that feeling, like the land itself was waiting for something. I arrived one July afternoon under a sky the color of lead, with the wind kicking up dust like old ghosts. Everything was dead quiet. Not even the dogs barked. The moment I stepped past the rusted gate, I felt it. Something was watching me. It wasn't just nerves. It was a weight on the back of my neck, a twist in my gut. You ever felt that? Inside, my grandmother, who, well into her 80s, still had the fierceness of a summer storm, hugged me without a word. Her eyes said it all: fear, exhaustion, and something deeper, resignation. That same night, she told me animals had been vanishing from the town for days. First the chickens, then a few goats. No blood, no bodies. Just fences left open and strange prints in the dirt. I laughed it off, thought it was her age talking or maybe a few petty thefts. But when I woke at dawn to find the pen empty and dry tracks leading toward the woods, something tightened along my spine. It didn't add up. The next morning I went into town to get some bread and coffee. Dry Creek looked the same as always. Dusty roads, faded porches, folks who avoid your gaze. But there was something off. Everyone was speaking in hushed tones, like they were all hiding the same secret. A whisper floating through the air like a breeze, too scared to blow. I didn't get it until I heard a boy mutter, "They say the rider came back." That name, I hadn't heard it in years. As kids, we were warned about the Midnight Rider, a figure who showed up when the town had done something wrong. I figured it was just a scary tale. But when I saw the boy's face, pale, dead serious, I knew something old had stirred again. And if you're anything like me, someone who can't stop thinking about the unexplainable, subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments about the scariest thing that's ever happened to you. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's haunted me to this day. And the worst part is that it didn't just happen to me. The story spread through town within hours. At first I figured it was the usual, small town gossip, something cooked up to break the boredom. But that afternoon, I saw it with my own eyes. I was sitting on a bench in front of Mr. Clayton's hardware store, sipping a warm soda, when I saw Danny, Rebecca's son from the post office, running like hell, as if something were chasing him. His shirt was filthy, his knees scraped, and his eyes were wide with terror. I jumped up right away. "What's wrong, kid?" I asked, grabbing his shoulders. He was shaking, literally, could barely get the words out. Just kept mumbling, I saw him, he took him." "Who took who?" I pressed. "The rider," he screamed, voice cracking. "He took Mr. Jefferson, right in front of me." A woman walking by crossed herself. My heart was pounding so loud it echoed in my ears. The kid was gasping like he'd run out of air. "Easy," I told him. "Where did this happen?" "Near the old bridge. I was just out there to get kindling. I heard this weird sound like dragging chains. I hid in the brush, and I saw him, tall, wearing this weird old hat, all black. Mr. Jefferson was yelling, but it was like his voice was being swallowed. Danny was only 8, mischievous, sure, but never a liar. That day there was no way he was pretending. I saw his sweat, his tears, his fear. It was real. Some of the grown-ups started gathering around, whispering things like, "Not again," or "It's starting back up." Nobody would look me in the eyes. I felt like I'd walked into a secret they'd all been keeping for years. That night, the house felt colder. My grandmother didn't speak of it. She just served me bland soup and prayed in silence before the little altar on the wall, candles flickering beside old photographs and a dried palm cross. I barely slept. The wind beat against the windows like it wanted in. Around midnight, I heard slow footsteps on the roof, as if someone was pacing up there. I froze in bed. Didn't move, didn't look, just kept repeating, "It's the wind, just the wind." But in the morning when I stepped into the yard, I saw something that chilled me. Footprints in the dust, deep and long, leading from the gate to the back room, then stopping, vanishing, like the earth had swallowed them whole. I started to realize the kid wasn't imagining things. Something deeper, darker was taking shape, and I was already in too far to walk away. Next morning, I went on my own to the place Danny said it happened. I knew no one would come with me, and honestly, I didn't blame them. I grabbed an old flashlight, a rusted knife I found in the pantry, and walked out to the old bridge, the one crossing the dry creek north of town, where water used to run when I was a kid. The trail was cracked and dusty. Even though it was barely 9, the sun was already burning my neck. When I got there, that same hollow feeling hit me, like something was pushing me back without laying a hand. But I kept going. Beneath the bridge, the dirt was marked. Not like human steps, not animal either. Deep, like someone had walked with heavy boots, dragging their feet. But the worst part, a few feet away, was smaller prints. Danny's, no doubt, with that awkward gait of his. He had definitely been there. I followed the prints for a while, until they suddenly stopped among dead shrubs. No snapped twigs, no sign anyone had pushed through. Just silence, and that damn smell. It was like rust, like dried blood. The same scent I noticed days earlier near my grandma's empty pen. I pulled my shirt over my nose and stepped back. I had no evidence, but I couldn't deny what the town was trying so hard to bury. Something was happening in Dry Creek, and it made no sense. But it was real. When I got back to town, I went straight to the church. That place always demanded respect, not fear, just reverence. But that day felt different. The front door was ajar. Inside, everything seemed normal. Wooden pews, the altar, the crucifix on the wall. But as I neared the confessional, I noticed something etched into the doorframe. Not fresh. Worn down, like it had been there for years. A circle with an inverted cross in the center. I'd never seen it before. Or maybe I had, but my mind had locked it away. Then I remembered something my grandfather said on his deathbed. One night, out of nowhere, he grabbed my hand and whispered, "If you see the mark, don't ask. Just leave." I never knew what he meant until now. I left the church feeling watched, didn't turn around, just walked home, didn't greet anyone. One thought filled my head. That symbol was a warning. And I had already crossed a line I shouldn't have. That night, there was no dinner. My grandmother didn't say a word. She just lit a candle on the table, like she used to when someone died unbaptized. I didn't ask why. Deep down, I already knew. At midnight, someone knocked on the door. 3 times, slow, dry. When I opened it, it was Rebecca. Her face was wrecked, eyes swollen, hands trembling. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Is Danny here?" Rebecca asked me, her voice cracked and trembling. "No, I haven't seen him since earlier today." "He never came home," she said, and her eyes welled with tears. "No one's seen him since he ran off. I asked around. The neighbors won't say anything. They just look down." I offered her a seat and poured the leftover coffee from breakfast. She held the cup in both hands, but didn't drink. Then, without looking at me, she whispered something I still struggle to repeat. "This has happened before." I looked at her, confused. I thought she meant some past accident, maybe another missing person. But no. What she told me that night shifted everything. Her father, Sal, who died over 2 decades ago, was one of the men who redirected the creek that once flowed through Dry Creek and continued toward nearby settlements. She explained that decades ago, the town decided to reroute the water and build an artificial canal to keep the flow for themselves, ensuring crops and livestock would thrive here. The neighboring communities dried up. People had to leave. Many died of hunger and sickness. Rebecca was only 5, but she remembered the late-night conversations between adults, always in whispers, always after locking the doors. After that, she said, things started happening. First, a wave of fever. Then 3 children died without reason. And then, people began to vanish. I listened, saying nothing. Each word seemed heavier than the last. When she first mentioned the rider, she crossed herself instinctively. My mother used to say he was a spirit sent to claim what we stole from the land. He wasn't out for revenge. He came for justice. I asked why no one ever told our generation. Why had they hidden it? Because no one wanted the guilt. It was easier to stay silent and pretend it never happened. We sat quietly for a while. Outside, the wind picked up. Dead leaves scattered across the yard like invisible hands were pushing them around. What if it's not about the water anymore? I blurted out. What if he's come for those who inherited the debt? Rebecca looked down. Finally, she sipped her coffee, then met my eyes and said, if that's true, then we're out of time. At that moment, it felt like something inside the town had snapped for good. Like the land itself had stirred and was starting to collect. The next morning, I didn't sleep at all. Rebecca had left before sunrise, her eyes hollow, like she already knew she'd never see her son again. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the steam from a coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The house smelled of damp stone and forgotten time. And in the stillness, it came again. 3 knocks at the door, just like the night before. When I opened it, there stood Mr. Theophilus. I recognized him instantly. Though he was hunched and shuffled his feet, his presence carried weight. He wore an old hat and leaned on a wooden cane, hand-carved by the look of it. "May I come in?" he asked without greeting. I nodded. My grandmother knew him, though she never spoke of him. They said he once worked at the county office. Others said he did time in prison. No one really knew. Only that he lived alone in a shack near the cemetery. He sat down slowly, like the weight he carried wasn't just in his bones. "You've seen him, haven't you?" he asked directly. I didn't answer, but I guess silence was enough. "Exactly 52 years ago, we did something we should have never done," he continued. "The water came down from the Sierra Blanca range, clean, wild water. It flowed through the towns of St. Martha, El Real, and Rock Hollow, all the way here. And one day, the mayor back then, a man named Crispin, decided we needed to think about ourselves. He said if we cut off the stream, we'd thrive. So that's what we did." Mr. Theophilus tightened his grip on the cane. His voice trembled, not with fear, but shame. Good years followed, crops flourished, livestock fattened, but in those other towns, only dust remained, and with the dust came rage, desperation. Some came to protest, others to beg. No one listened. I stared at him, speechless. A few months later, he said, it began. First, the fever that took the kids. Then a fire in the chapel. No one could explain it. And then, people started vanishing. He paused, breathing with effort. The first time we saw him was in the old pasture, a dark figure, riding something that wasn't a horse. It had no face, just a shape that appeared when the moon turned yellow. I shivered. He returns every 20 years, not to kill, to collect what belongs to him, what the land never forgave. I stood up, confused, angry, scared. "Why now?" Mr. Theophilus stood slowly. For the first time, he looked me straight in the eyes. "Because we were the ones who stole. But you, the children of this town, you knew and stayed silent." And with that, he walked out, as if the wind itself was guiding him. I was alone, but not the same, because now I understood. The rider wasn't a legend. He was the debt we never stopped owing, That same evening, after Mr. Theophilus left, I walked the streets of Dry Creek with a weight pressing on my chest. It felt like everyone knew, like they weren't avoiding eye contact out of guilt, but because they had already accepted that nothing could be done. But I couldn't sit still. I convinced 3 neighbors, Matt, a farmer, Mr. Harris, the guy who drove the water truck, and my cousin Frank, who had recently moved back from up north. None of them fully believed it, but all of them remembered odd things. We agreed to go to the old creek bed, the one folks used to call Bitter Hollow, where the water used to flow before the redirection. We walked at dusk, the sky glowing red behind Hat Ridge. Each of us brought whatever we could: a lantern, a shovel, a machete. I packed a flashlight and my grandfather's old revolver, not out of necessity, more out of habit. I didn't say a word, just slid it into my bag and followed. The path to Bitter Hollow sloped downward. The ground cracked under our steps. The air was thick, charged like before a storm. No birds, no insects, just our feet and our breath. When we arrived, the first thing we saw was how dry it was. Drier than ever, not even a trace of dampness. The stones looked split down the middle. And there, in the creek bed, we saw something that made us freeze. Tracks, not new, but not ancient either. Deep, as if something heavy had been dragged through. They curved and twisted in strange, deliberate patterns. "Did some kind of animal do that?" Frank asked. No one answered. We walked carefully like we were on sacred ground. Then Matt stopped. "Over there," he said, pointing to a flat stone beside a mesquite. We approached. Carved deep into the rock was the same symbol I'd seen at the church, a circle with an inverted cross. But here there was another marking, like a burned, upside-down horseshoe. Mr. Harris muttered a prayer. No one laughed. Suddenly, we heard footsteps behind us. We spun around, ready. It was Mr. Theophilus, alone, walking slowly, as if the land itself knew him. "This is where it all began," he said, staring at the earth. He told us this exact spot was where they dug the channel, where they sealed off the natural stream and forced the water elsewhere. What no one said back then was that they hadn't just blocked water. They had blocked something else. "Since then," he said in a hushed voice, "every generation has had to pay something. What we did doesn't wash away." We stood there in silence. The wind picked up, lifting the dust like the ground was breathing. And that night I realized what was coming wasn't just another story. It was the reckoning for decades of buried truth. We returned to town under a moonless sky. No one spoke. The silence wasn't from fatigue. It was something heavier, as if we'd brought something back with us from Bitter Hollow. Something unseen, but present and heavy. When we arrived, the news had already spread. I don't know how. In towns like Dry Creek, all it takes is a pebble moving for someone across town to know who kicked it. By the time we reached the square, people were already waiting. Familiar faces, folks who'd greeted us all our lives, but that night they said nothing. They just watched. And that's when he appeared. We didn't hear him arrive, didn't see him walk up. He was just there, standing in front of the chapel, shrouded in the mist rolling down from the hills. He was tall, unnaturally tall, dressed in a long, dark coat. His hat cast a shadow that hid his face. He didn't speak. He simply raised a hand and pointed north, toward the source of the old canal. The place where, as Mr. Theophilus had said, we'd sealed off something that should never have been sealed. No one moved. No one asked anything, because at that moment, we all understood. This wasn't a ghost. It wasn't mass hysteria. It was a warning. Mr. Theophilus stepped forward, took off his hat, placed it over his chest, and said in the steadiest voice I'd ever heard from him, "We know what we did, and we know what must be done." What happened next wasn't planned. No one gave orders, no one organized a thing. But one by one, the townsfolk left for their homes. Some came back with shovels, others with buckets, lanterns, ropes. No panic, no shouting, just a calm, steady movement. Like everyone suddenly remembered what needed to be done. I stayed behind, watching that dark figure or whatever it was. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them on me. And in that moment, I knew he hadn't come for revenge. He'd come to balance the scale, like someone sent to close a very old debt, and that night we were finally going to pay it. Mr. Theophilus walked up to me, placed a hand on my shoulder. "This isn't about forgiveness anymore," he said. "It's about restoring balance." I nodded. Swallowing felt like a chore. But something deep inside me, something old, inherited, told me we were finally doing the right thing. The rider turned silently and faded into the mist without a trace. Not a footstep, not a sound. Just the wind weaving through the trees and the certainty that something had been seen and accepted. And so, without another word, the entire town began walking toward the place where it had all begun. That dawn, Dry Creek didn't sleep. By 3 a.m, you could hear footsteps, the scrape of shovels, low voices organizing into groups. No yelling, no orders, no speeches, just movement. As if some force older than all of us was guiding every gesture. We climbed toward the spring where the old canal had started, walking along the narrow trail beside the Ortega family's former cornfield. The sky was still black, but the mist had started to lift. The moon hung overhead, pale, like it was watching too. I walked beside Frank, flashlight in one hand, the shovel passed down from my father in the other. Behind us came women with buckets, kids carrying ropes, elderly folks wrapped in blankets, but moving with purpose. No one stayed behind. Even those who never believed showed up. Nobody asked why. Everyone just knew. If we didn't do this tonight, there wouldn't be another chance. When we arrived, the ground felt softer than before, as if the earth itself had been waiting to be opened. Mr. Harris was the first to drive his shovel in. Then the rest of us followed. We dug in silence, tracing the old natural stream path, barely remembered by most. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time didn't matter anymore. We only knew we couldn't stop. Sweat soaked our clothes. Blisters bloomed on our hands. The air thickened with every shovelful, but no one complained. No one asked for a break. Next to me, a boy, he couldn't have been older than 12, was carrying stones without a word. He looked at me once, mud streaked across his face, and asked, "Do you think this'll make him go away?" I didn't have an answer. Just before sunrise, Matt shouted, "Here, it's damp!" We gathered around. At the bottom of the trench, the soil had turned dark. We reached down with our hands. It was true, it was wet, and deeper still, a thin, warm stream trickled through, like a vein stirring back to life. Many of us couldn't hold back tears. Mr. Theophilus, who had been watching from a nearby stone, slowly got up. He walked toward us, knelt down, and plunged his hands into the mud. "Life used to flow here," he said. "Here's where we buried it, and here's where we're digging it back up." A low thunder rumbled in the distance. The sky began to lighten. The scent of fresh earth filled the air. The mist lifted, and with it came something else. Relief. We kept digging until the canal was wide enough. Then, using buckets and shovels, we broke through the last bit of earth that blocked the spring's path. The ground shuddered slightly, and within seconds the water began to flow. Not much, but enough. We watched it move, clear and certain, as if it knew exactly where to go. Not to us, to those who came before us, to the ones who died waiting. And for the first time in years, Dry Creek felt something return to its rightful place. The water was back, not roaring, not flooding, but with purpose. That morning, no one cheered, no one cried out. We just stood there, watching the open canal. Some dropped to their knees. Others sat in the dirt, drained, staring as the current carved its way forward, like it had waited underground for years just to breathe. I walked home alone. I needed the quiet, needed to make sense of what we had done. I didn't eat, didn't sleep. My body trembled from exhaustion, but my mind wouldn't rest. Something inside told me it wasn't over. That evening I went to the church. It was empty. The door creaked open like always, but the air inside felt heavier. It smelled of melted wax and damp stone. I walked up to the altar, where the old wooden crucifix still hung, one I'd seen 1,000 times without really noticing. That's when I saw it. On the wall behind the altar, a new mark had appeared. It wasn't painted, it wasn't carved. It looked like a burn, an imperfect oval, and inside it, the shape of an upside-down horseshoe. The same symbol we'd seen on the stone at Bitter Hollow, only now it glowed, silent and seared, into the church's stone wall. There was no smoke, no scent of fire. Just that image, as clear as if it had been scorched there minutes before. I didn't move. I wasn't afraid. It felt like a message, as if something was saying, "You did it, but don't forget." I sat in the nearest pew. My hands shook. I could hear my breath echoing through the room. And for a second, I thought I saw a shadow move at the back. Tall, still, silent. I didn't turn, I didn't have to. I knew if it was there, it wasn't for me. It was making sure we understood. That night, the whole town ate together. No one spoke of the rider. No one mentioned symbols or debts. People shared food, told stories, and for the first time in years, candles were lit in the plaza, without anyone feeling watched. Since then, every year, right before dry season begins, the folks in Dry Creek clean the canal. Some do it out of tradition, others out of respect, and a few, like me, out of memory. The mark in the church is still there. It doesn't glow anymore. It doesn't burn. But it hasn't faded either, and though no one speaks of it aloud, we all know it's not a threat. It's a reminder. Because in this town, we learn something others forget. Whatever we take from the land, eventually the land comes to collect. Years have passed since that night the water came back. Few of those who were there remain. Some passed of old age. Others moved to be with their children in distant cities. Life, like the water, moves on. But I'm still here. I live alone in my grandmother's house, though she passed 3 winters ago. I keep it clean. I tend her altar. And every now and then, I walk down to the canal to make sure nothing's blocking it. No one told me to, but something inside says I must. People sometimes ask why I never left Dry Creek, why I didn't try my luck in Houston or Phoenix. I smile. I don't answer. How do you explain there are things you can't walk away from? That some stories grab hold of you and never let go? I still dream of that hooded figure. Not every night. Only when the sky turns heavy with clouds and the ground breathes moisture like a sleeping beast. In those dreams, there are no words, no faces, no voices, just footsteps in the dust, symbols etched into stone, and a silent river winding beneath my feet. I saw Danny once, not long ago. He was visiting with his wife and kids. He's a father now, taller, quieter, different. He hugged me tight, like he didn't want to let go. We didn't talk much, but I noticed he avoided looking toward the church, like he still remembered what he saw as a boy, like he knew some things never fade. The mark on the chapel wall remains. They say people have tried to cover it with plaster. A restoration artist from out east even offered to repaint it. But the symbol always returns, like it's part of the building's bones. No one touches it anymore. No one dares. Sometimes, walking through town, I see the elders glance at each other when the drought begins. Barely a nod, a silent agreement. And the next morning, they're out there with shovels, clearing brush from the canal, scrubbing the stone bed. Not because anyone tells them to, because they feel it. I don't know if the rider will return. Don't know if he was real, or if we all saw what we needed to see to finally act. But what I do know, the only thing I'm certain of, is that ever since we reopened that stream, the town breathes differently. The earth no longer groans at night. The houses don't rattle before dawn. And the children laugh again. Still, whenever the skies go grey and the birds vanish, I light a candle in the window. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because some debts are paid once, and others are paid with memory.